on that task force. Those are city agencies that have to deal with that, particularly the buildings department. Fire department is very concerned with it. The safety of their men and women who go in there, and the safety of the residents that are living in places that aren't safe to be in. As far as the visas go, I think everybody should be on equal ground with visas. We have an immigration policy in this country, and we've asked people to follow that policy. And there are people who waited online that shouldn't be jumped ahead of, as you said. And maybe the reform that we should have is that we should shorten that process, because all of us are immigrants. This country is made of immigrants. My family came from Poland and Ireland. But there's a process in place, and maybe the reform we should be talking about is shortening that process, but certainly no one should be jumping ahead of the other.
Yeah, so my concern is always about purchases of properties. We've gone through battles after battles where some people will use eminent domain to seize properties and to use it for whatever development they want to do. When I was running for public advocate in 2013, one of my biggest issues was the fact that developers, well actually, the New York Public Library was selling off their properties to developers for huge profits, taking away from the education of children to just further this school to prison pipeline that we're talking about. So there's a lot of corrupt activities that goes on whenever property is involved, because it's money. They want to make money. And so you have to follow that money. And one of my biggest concerns is when people are trying to jump ahead, like you mentioned, we have a serious immigration problem right now where people are being denied access to regular human rights, civil rights, because they don't have this money. And it's not right for anybody else that has that money to sort of jump ahead. Well, definitely what I'd like to do. It's going to be tricky because I'm going to be the junior congressman. But I will definitely make my voice heard loud and clear in those halls of Congress that we need to do some serious regulation on any kind of transactions that involve people and property and immigration.
I would do more. I have done more than just sit on a task force. As you know, Bob, I have drafted legislation in this regard, and you and I and your committee have worked very hard on this issue over the last year or so. I've drafted legislation that would allow the city inspectors to cite a location for illegal conversion based on circumstantial evidence. Right now, they're required to get into the building to see what's going on, whether it's illegally converted. And most times they can't get in because they won't be let in. And if they can't get in, they close the case. You know what? We send people to jail based on circumstantial evidence. We should be able to use circumstantial evidence to allege that a certain building or a series of buildings have illegal conversion. And that's my legislation, one piece of legislation. Another piece legislation would create a immediately hazardous condition for illegal conversions and issue a vacate order. And then also in the third piece of legislation with the Borough President Eric Adams, we are trying to hit those who create these illegal conversions in the pocketbook, in their wallet. And those are the three pieces of legislation we're working on now. As a congressman, what I can do is take a look at this visa class that you have asked, that you talked about. But moreover, I could, as a congressman, request and demand a federal investigation into the EB-5 visa program, and that's what I would do as a congressman.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for coming. My question is simple. I take care of my elderly parents. One is 91, the other one is 85. What are your plans for Medicare and for Social Security, as it directly affects them, and as you can see, in not so long time, it'll affect me. So.
Good question.
and not so long it's going to affect me. I am the caretaker of an 88-year-old mother who has dementia, and my father had passed away in 1986, and I'm an only child. I am fortunate enough to have my mother at home, but I have to have 24-hour care with her. And my position has been about Medicare and Social Security that the United States government has shaken the hands of its citizens and said, if you participate in this program, this will be your benefits. And we should keep that promise. Any changes shouldn't affect the people who are in the system now. That's unfair. That's reneging on a commitment that we've made to the American people. Our government does that often, but it's wrong. Any changes in the system going forward should not affect people who are retired, people who are near retirement, certainly shouldn't affect your two parents, and shouldn't affect my mother.
And as I mentioned in my opening statement, I'm all for Medicare for all. You know, everybody out, everybody in, nobody out. That's something that can be done in this country. It's really unfortunate that we always see these situations where government programs are being sacrificed. They're being pitted against each other. They say we don't have money for Social Security and Medicare, but we do have billions of dollars to send drones over to other countries and kill people.
Right.
So it seems like we're more concerned with killing in this country than we are with saving people's lives.
When I hear something like we should not have any changes shouldn't affect the people now, that means that changes will affect those in the future. I say we should not have any changes to Social Security. We should save Social Security as we know it. And to only save it for those now and not in the future is wrong. And so what we need to do is save Social Security. Simple way to do that is to lift the cap on the contributions to Social Security that come out of the paychecks each year. Absolutely. Those, once you hit a certain level of income, you no longer have to pay into the Social Security system. So if you're making over $118,000 a year, you no longer have to pay into Social Security. And those who are making less are paying every paycheck. And those who could best afford it are not paying into Social Security. The simple way to save Social Security is to remove that cap and have every American participate and pay into Social Security. And that way it will be secure from decades to come, and everyone will be secure in getting Social Security. We wouldn't have to talk about, like we do now in the Republican budget, that they're proposing to cut the cost of living adjustments for Social Security beneficiaries. That's outrageous. That's outrageous. And to say, okay, we shouldn't do it for those now, but it'd be okay for those later is wrong. Is wrong. We are all Americans. We've all paid into Social Security. We should all be protected by Social Security. Medicare is another issue, and the voucher system that they propose will make Americans pay for any increases in healthcare costs. Voucher systems are bad. Medicare needs to be saved, and I have a plan to save that too, but I'm out of time.
Thank you, John.
I didn't say it needs to be changed. I said, but if any change is going to be made, that it shouldn't affect the people now. But I didn't say it needs to be changed. It needs to be fully funded. But just as people who are entering the system now, if it's going to be changed at all, if we're going to lift caps, if we're going to increase benefits for people in the future or decrease benefits in the future, I'm not in favor of decreasing benefits. People who have contributed to this fund for 30 or 40 years through their lifetime deserve the benefit at the end. But certainly some of the programs that are being discussed now, some of the proposals being discussed now, are talking about changing it for the benefits of the people who are existing in the system now, and I'm opposed to that adamantly. But I'm not suggesting any changes should be made.
Well, the point is, there are changes in the Republican budget now. And if you vote for that budget, then you're looking to change Social Security, and that's wrong.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John McBeth. I live on Staten Island. I was born and raised there. I'm a new member of the middle class from my family that grew up with humble beginnings, so to speak. One of the biggest burdens on the middle class right now is the affordability of college and higher education. And I would like to know what specifically would you do with regard to the current legislation that's being bantered about with regard to student loan relief for college students?
Good question.
College now is costing people $40, $50, or $60,000 a year. In 4 years, you talk about $250,000, and then most people are going to have to go to graduate school afterward. And they're, after that, entering an economy that doesn't have any jobs for the students. We have to create jobs. People can't even afford to make their student loan payments. I hire lawyers for a living. I have 50 lawyers. If I have one opening, I'll get 100 resumes. Those students are coming out with $300,000, $400,000 in student loans, and I start them at $60,000. Most of those kids can't even make their minimum payments. You want to be an assistant district attorney in this city? Vinny was one, I was one for Mr. Morgenthau. You have to live with 3 or 4 other people in order to do it. So, and most people can't afford to pay that without loans, pay their college tuitions without loans. Most families can't afford that. And that's one child. If you have multiple children, you just double that, multiply how many children you have. So we've got, you're smiling, you have more than one?
I have 6 altogether, the 3 that are coming to college.
And many of them come at the same time. So we have to make things more affordable for our families. We have to make things more reasonable. We have to help people to pay for it. As I said before, 18 years from now, I'm going to have to figure out a way to pay for my child's education. And by that time, it's going to be $100,000 a year. And I'm not going to be making that much money, particularly if you elect me to Congress. So, making things more affordable for people, figuring out ways to help people, because there's so many people that want to pay for their kids' tuition. And know what the current administration wants to do? The 529 education plan, that little bit of interest that you make every year from your contributions, they wanted to tax that. When Nancy Pelosi tells the president you've done something wrong, you know you've done something wrong.
So education is a serious problem in this country. You know, we have a system where children are being tasked to pass tests so that their schools get graded. And when they get to be college age, if they're lucky enough to go to college, they're being used as a revenue stream. Their loans are just ridiculous. I mean, I'm looking over there, I have a 10-year-old right in the audience there, and my wife and I are trying to figure out what are we going to do for college for him. And as I mentioned earlier in my opening statement, as part of our Green New Deal, we can fund colleges if we tax the 1%, and right, so it'll be well to 1%. If we went back to the standards back in the 70s, and people were paying their fair share of taxes, that money could actually fund a lot of our education system. We could fund our schools. We could even have free colleges again. Woo! I mean, Cooper Union was a free college. You know, they're going through their issues right now, and I believe that this all could be done with fair taxing to the 1% and the wealthy in this country.
Just for the record, I graduated law school in 1985, and I'm still paying my student loans 30 years later. So, so I know what you're saying. But you know, everybody says they want to make. Dan said he wanted to make it more affordable, but the budget that his party just passed in the House makes it more expensive for people to go to college, for families to go to college. That's the budget that his party passed in the House last week. They would kill the Pell Grant system that helps people, helps students, and helps families to go to school. So I want to make sure that programs like the Pell Grants are renewed. I want to also make sure that we have for student loans the lowest possible interest rate. But I want to do something else. I want to get colleges to have some skin in the game. Because right now they have no skin in the game, and they can charge whatever tuition they want, and you have to pay it, and then you have these outrageous loans. I want to make colleges partly responsible for the loan debt, of the students that are in their schools. So that way they will keep, if they have skin in the game, they risk losing some of that money if the students can't pay it. They will think twice about soaring tuition rates, and they will think twice about helping students get jobs so they can pay their loans. That's what we have to do, and that's what I would work for.
Hello. There are several international trade treaties that are being drafted in secret by multinational corporations. This is a secret even to most members of Congress. I'm not going to ask you, well, the Obama White House is in support of these. The nearest one coming to Congress is the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Many call that NAFTA on steroids. I'm not going to ask you how you would vote. I'm going to ask you to imagine that both fast-track authority, which would take the negotiation of these out of Congress and put it in the president's hands, assume that was granted by this current Congress, and assume the TPP passed in this current Congress. What do you believe the effects in District 11 would be from the passage of TPP? What would that look like here at home?
If there's no objection, we're just going to vary and go right to left, so it's only fair. Vincent, is that okay? No objection?
Sure. I can tell you, I would vote against TPP. It's bad for the American worker, it's bad for the labor force, it's bad for wages, it's bad for the environment, and it's bad because it takes the jurisdiction of the United States away from things that happen in our country. And it's bad, it's just bad policy, so I would vote no on TPP, and certainly against fast tracking. Fast tracking actually tells the Congress, here's the package, you can't change it, you can't alter it in any way, all you could do is vote up or down. And Congress should never allow its authority to be restricted in that way. If TPP were to pass, what would happen here, as well as all over this city and all over this country, is that we would see more outsourcing of jobs overseas. We would see the continuation of wages being low, because the outsourcing of jobs allows corporations to force American workers to take low wages, and we would see possibly in this country or in other places explorations and work by multinational corporations that could hurt the environment, like the barrier reef. Those are types of things that would be allowed under the TPP. And as I said, one of the biggest issues is jurisdiction. Under TPP, these multinational corporations would be allowed to sue countries that endanger their profits. And if you're allowed to sue a country that endangers your profit and get an international tribunal to decide the case, then you know what? We lose the jurisdiction over our own country. That's wrong.
Bravo!
You're right. TPP is NAFTA on steroids. I spent a lot of time in the street when I was producing independent media, covering these hidden meetings that are going on. They're secret because they're evil. Basically, the effect it will have on us locally is because what it's doing globally. You know, when you have a TPP in place, that means somebody in some other country is subjected to whatever the will that organization is making you do. And a lot of times they have jobs there, and when people try to organize and form unions, people actually get killed by trying to form a union. And that's something we would never stand for in this country, so I don't know why we would stand for it anywhere around this world. So, you know, this goes into foreign policy and everything. I mean, so whatever TPP does on a global scale, it always affects us on a local scale. We have people in our communities that have family globally. So this is why TPP is something I would totally vote against, and we need to just get it out of our language.
We shouldn't fast track anything without debate. We're having a debate tonight. so that all of you can hear different points of view about things that affect our families and our nation. Yet our president wants Congress to vote on something that they don't know the details of. We will find out afterward. That is incredibly dangerous. My position on trade, I think instead of talking about free trade, we should talk about fair trade. We should look at how any trade agreement affects the American consumer and the American worker. And if the playing field isn't even, if there's a disadvantage to our country, we have to start putting America first. The American consumers and the American workers first. So nothing should be done in secret when it comes to a policy that our country is going to commit to. Because once we're committed, we're stuck. And I can't think of anything that any of us would want to vote on if we didn't know the detailing.
Or second follow-up question. I know I said I wasn't asking you how you would vote, but do I understand you would at least vote no for fast tracking?
I would vote no for fast tracking.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
What about TPP?
Good evening. This question for everyone. I just got home late from work, and I'm really interested in the people in this district. There's a lot of hardworking people here. People work 1 or 2 jobs, and a lot of people who create jobs here. And I just don't know how, given the system in Washington, given $18 trillion in debt, how we can continue the way we're doing, how we can continue with spending, not have any cuts, without raising taxes. Are you all saying that we have to raise taxes? And how are you going to do that without killing the jobs that we're all coming in working? Sometimes working 2, just to send our kids maybe to preschool? Tell me that you're not going to raise our taxes. That's what I want to hear.
Well, let me tell you this.
You already have.
Let me tell you this. Multinational corporations who are not taxed on their overseas profits that cause a lot of the problems we have in this country should be taxed on those overseas profits, because that is wrong. That's why they have those profits overseas, because it's a tax shelter for them. And that's multinational corporations. The people most able to pay those taxes should pay them. And no, it helps everybody here. It helps everybody here, because that helps pay for the infrastructure programs that we need in this country, that create jobs in this country, that create the economic activity and stimulus in this country that we need. So everything has an effect. And yes, I'm saying don't give those at the top end a decrease in their top tax rate to 25%, while at the same time you're cutting Medicare, you're cutting Medicaid, and you're cutting Pell Grants for college students, and you're raising, in effect, tax rates for middle class. This Republican budget raises tax rates on the middle class. It's an independent study that said under this proposal that the Republicans passed last week, the middle-class taxpayers would pay an average of $2,000 more in taxes under this proposal, while the top tax rate for millionaires gets reduced to 25%. So that's what we need to fight against. We do not need to reduce those tax rates for the wealthiest taxpayers at the expense of you and me and our families and our kids and our seniors. That's what I'm saying.
You're right, it is hurting. And why it's hurting you is because we're not taxing the 1% and the richest people in this country. I mean, we have 50 billionaires in the city alone that should be taxed. And if we tax those people, we could definitely provide resources to so many of the working and the 99% of the homeowners in this country. The other thing is, it's just a total unfair balance of how this tax system is set up. One of the things I would like to do, like I said before, is tax the 1% and tax the richest. We can provide public housing, public schools that are quality and better than we have now. Why should anybody have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet? If we tax these 1%ers, we can actually have all the money that we need in this country.
I think the best way for someone to determine when you hear three people speaking about what they're going to do or what they're not going to do is see what they've done in the past. Councilman Gentile has raised your taxes. He just has. James, as far as I know, hasn't raised your taxes. I've never raised your taxes. If the Republican budget that Vinny talks about, that actually he's blaming me, but I've never voted on it because I'm not in Congress yet, actually demands that our government have a balanced budget within a certain amount of time, just like you have to in your household, just like everybody in this room has to in their households. One of the ways to do that without raising taxes is to have more contributors. You create jobs for people. You let corporations that are creating jobs, instead of suppressing their ability to be here. You know, Rick Perry comes to New York 3 times a year and encourages New York businesses to come to Texas because it's more business friendly. You know, Tim Horton bought the Burger Kings. The Canadian company bought Burger King. They're called inversions, and pay now corporate taxes